Teleological versus mechanistic questions. The atomists, unlike Socrates, Plato and Aristotle, sought to explain the world without introducing the notion of purpose or final cause. The final cause of an occurrence is an event in the future for the sake of which the occurrence takes place. In human affairs, this conception is applicable. Why does the baker make bread? Because people will be hungry. Why are railways built? Because people will wish to travel. In such cases, things are explained by the purpose they serve. When we ask why concerning an event, we may mean either of two things. We may mean what purpose did this event serve, or we may mean what earlier circumstances caused this event. The answer to the former question is a teleological explanation, or an explanation by final causes. The answer to the latter is a mechanistic explanation. I do not see how it could have been known in advance which of these two questions science ought to ask, or whether it ought to ask both. But experience has shown that the mechanistic question leads to scientific knowledge, while the teleological question does not. The atomists asked the mechanistic question, and gave the mechanistic answer. Their successors, until the Renaissance, were more interested in the teleological question, and thus led science up a blind alley. Bertrand Russell. This is a brilliant synopsis of the difference between teleological and mechanistic questions. The latter questions are superb for answering how but say nothing at all about why. Mechanistic questions are fundamentally anti-religious. The mechanistic view simply refuses to ponder the whys of existence. Everything is analyzed in terms of the immediately preceding causes. There is no notion of anything aiming for any particular future state, no intentionality. Russell rightly says that teleological questions are valid in relation to human conduct, yet surely he means a much more general point. Teleology is all about mind while mechanism is all about matter. The debate about teleological versus mechanistic questions is just another way of framing the mind-matter problem. Minds are purposeful, dead, mindless matter is not. According to mechanistic theories, mind just happened to emerge from purposeless, mechanistic collisions and interactions. There are several enormous problems here. How can mind emerge from matter if it is so radically different from matter? This immediately raises the problem of Cartesian dualism. Two radically different substances cannot interact, and neither can one emerge from the other. Descartes consigned them to two totally separate domains. Materialists will never answer the problem of mind. Mind, as understood by Descartes, is permanently outside the materialist paradigm. Mechanistic questions and answers, no matter how useful up to a point, will never address any of the fundamental questions of existence concerning souls, God, consciousness and the afterlife. Mechanistic explanations will never explain why. They will never provide purposes and meaning. For that, idealism must be invoked. The essential feature of mind is not consciousness and nor is it reason. The key to mind is purpose. Teleology. All mental activity is directed towards an end. It is intentional. It might be utterly hopeless at securing its ends. It might have no clever plan or no ability to reason its way to where it wants to go. Yet its purpose is not at all difficult to define. It is not some far distant grand plan. Its purpose is the one nature identified: to achieve more power. Imagine a mind operating across many eons. All it ever does, unconsciously, is ask itself a single question: how do I acquire more power? 49.9% of the time it might fail to increase its power, but that means that 50.1% of the time it succeeds, and that tiny difference over countless years means the difference between inert rocks and Leonardo da Vinci. Minds are always pushing to become more powerful minds, to exercise more power over their environment. The difference between a closed pair in an unconscious mind struggling and groping blindly towards more power and be closed pair in mindless mechanistic behavior, is at any instant impossible to determine. We have no way to distinguish the two situations. Mechanists have simply concluded that no mind is at work. They say that evolution is not a minded process but simply comes about by accident. Random, purposeless interactions and collisions produce certain outcomes, and these outcomes are either naturally selected by the environment, in which case they prosper and multiply in the environment, or they do not flourish and die off. But what is natural selection if not a contest for power? If two boxers are trying to win a fight, they will struggle and one will win. Both boxers are fighting with a specific purpose, to win, but only one achieves it. The winner is naturally selected and prospers. The loser fades away one way or another. Would we ever say that the two boxers randomly threw punches and that one accidental set of punches was more successful than the other, and that this was the basis of evolution? Because we can't see any evidence of mind at the atomic and molecular level, scientists treat atoms and molecules as nothing but mechanisms, but in fact, they have no way to eliminate the possibility that natural selection is minded and teleological rather than simply mechanistic. If atoms and molecules are themselves minded, there can be no surprise that they eventually give rise to beings like us that are unmistakably minded beings with intentionality. If atoms and molecules are not minded, it is the greatest miracle of eternity that random collisions between dead, mindless particles create mathematicians, philosophers and writers of love poems. The maxim that something can never come from nothing is equally applicable to this situation. Something open parent life, mind, consciousness closed parent cannot come from antecedent states in which these qualities are non-existent open parent, that is, in which they are nothing closed parent. A wholly new phenomenon cannot emerge from an environment or constituents in which it is entirely absent. That would be the equivalent of an existence springing from non-existence. It's impossible. All the qualities that manifest themselves in existence must already be present in much simpler form in the elementary units of existence. In other words, life, mind and consciousness must exist explicitly or implicitly within the monads of existence. They are released by the process of evolution, by simpler things becoming more complex. Life, mind and consciousness, all barely noticeable at a simple level of existence, become evident only when complexity is sufficient to start expressing them meaningfully. Until such meaningful expression is attained, it's simpler to apply mechanistic thinking, but that does not mean that teleology isn't in operation. The mistake the scientific materialists always make is to take absence of evidence as evidence of absence. Russell is wrong. There is no sharp division between teleological and mechanistic questions. We should apply mechanistic thinking to situations where there is no obvious evidence of mind at work, but in the full knowledge that mind eventually comes into play only because it is already present at the simpler, so-called mechanistic stage of existence. Here is Russell's metaphor for humanity's position in the universe, and all scientific materialists share the same sentiment. He says that the human race resembles a group of shipwrecked sailors on a fragile raft in a vast sea at a moonless midnight. One by one, the exhausted sailors slip off the raft into the water, never to be heard from again. Finally, the last man falls off and disappears beneath the waves. The ocean rolls on, heedless. It cares not for humanity. It doesn't even know of its existence. The universe is just like the ocean. It's a vast, implacable machine governed by inexorable mechanistic laws. Humanity has no significance at all in this picture. Human beings are meaningful only in a teleological universe that is entirely concerned with meaning and purpose. In a mechanistic universe, devoid of meaning and purpose, humanity can never be anything more than a bizarre and supremely pointless sideshow. In a teleological universe, on the other hand, it's all about us, we, and higher consciousnesses, are the whole point of existence. We are the culmination of the universe's purpose, the actualization of its potential. Ultimately, the opposing views boil down to this: one close parent. If the universe is mechanistic, we are machines, and our notion of free will is a spectacularly odd illusion. How likely is it that lifeless, mindless atoms would randomly collide until a certain group of creatures open parent close parent had been naturally selected to delude ourselves that we are free against all the mechanistic evidence refuting us? This is about as perverse and unlikely as cars dream of electric sheep. Close parent. If the universe is not a machine, then it is an organism. It is alive. It has the quality of mind. It is capable of generating consciousness, and with consciousness something remarkable enters the universe: free will, the ability to freely choose between different options. In a universe containing consciousness and free will, the universe cannot be mechanistic and deterministic. There is no such thing as a law of nature or science that can capriciously do whatever it likes. A law that possessed free will would not be a law, since it would never be certain what it was going to do. So, is the universe a mechanism or an organism? To express the problem in another way: is free will real or an elaborate illusion? All scientific materialists, according to their own dogmatic ideology, are not free and never freely choose to do anything. When they stand there pondering what to do, they are merely inefficient machines taking far too long to perform the inevitable actions that the inescapable chain of cause and effect will impose on them. As for the Illuminati, we know we are authentically free, and we know that means the universe is fundamentally alive and teleological. Your turn. Are you free or a machine? One great problem with teleological thinking is that it naturally lends itself to animism. Thunder happens because the thunder god is angry, so the god must be appeased, probably by a sacrifice. Animism evolves into monotheism. God floods the world because he is displeased with humanity. God helps to kill the Canaanites because he promised their land to the Jews. The chosen people. God parts the Red Sea to permit the Jews to escape Pharaoh. God lets the Babylonians sack Jerusalem and enslave the Jews because the Jews failed to worship him properly. God sends his Son to redeem humanity. Abrahamic thinking is entirely teleological, in the worst possible way. Mythos in general is wholly teleological. All narratives revolve around intentions, purposes. All of us are natural teleological thinkers for the simple reason that we apply teleological thinking all the time. We do everything for a calculated purpose. Logos thinking is primarily mechanistic, reductive, analytic. Teleology in Logos terms is completely different from teleology in Mythos terms. The second law of thermodynamics is a classic example of mechanistic thinking. Yet it is in fact also completely teleological. It is stating that the purpose of the universe is to maximize its entropy. It's as if every process in the universe is contemplating how best to increase disorder. As long as teleological thinking is applied in this kind of way, there's nothing anti-scientific about it. Teleology degenerates into nonsense when it posits a conscious personality, a god, angel, superbeing, making things happen in the world. Teleology is sensible when it analyses what the purpose of natural laws are and what state they are inevitably heading towards. The concept of the expanding universe allows us to ponder the teleology of this process. Where is it leading? What will its final outcome be? And why does such an expansionary process exist in the first place? What is the sufficient reason for it? All scientific laws are in fact teleological because all things are happening for the sake of final causes. Should we say that all entropic processes have a tendency to increase entropy, or that the final state of maximum entropy is an event in the future for the sake of which all of these entropic increases take place? They are the sine qua non for that final state. We can look at the same issue both mechanistically and teleologically with no sacrifice of intellectual rigor. Any law whose implications can be examined from the perspective of the end of time is teleological. If we predict how the universe will end, we are engaging in teleology. Teleology is simply the study of the telos, the end, completion, the omega point, the final absolute state. We can study that question via logos, means open pair in mathematics, science and philosophy, close pair, or via mythos, means open pair in the Last Judgment, the Apocalypse, Armageddon, the end of days, the rapture, Judgment Day, close pair. Teleology does not imply anti-scientific thinking. Only when it is linked with mythos thinking is this the outcome. In the mechanistic view, the universe and human beings are machines. All the mechanisms that apply to the cosmos equally apply to us. In the organism view, it is just as true that the cosmos is as writ large. Whatever processes are evident in us are present in the cosmos too. Whether you accept that the universe is a machine or an organism, you are committed to the position that man is a microcosm of the macrocosm, open paren as above, so below, close paren. A machine universe produces machine humans, and evolving cosmic organism produces evolving human organisms. Hegel characterized this evolution as proceeding by way of the resolution of contradictions through the dialectic process of thesis, antithesis and synthesis, being repeated over and over again at higher levels until an omega point of perfection is attained, the absolute. If the universe gives rise to an absolute, then that is equivalent to God. If the universe is a machine, it will never produce God, except as the most improbable accident of natural selection. Theologian Friedrich Schleiermacher expressed the view that each individual part of the universe is vital to the whole. For the universe to realize itself to the fullest, every part must also achieve its fullest potential. That is also the position of the Illuminati. The best possible universe is the one in which every monadic soul has attained the status of God. In terms of humanity, the greatest world is one in which all human beings have maximized their abilities. Therefore, politically, the Illuminati are opposed to any forces that stand in the way of people achieving everything of which they are capable. The greatest obstacle to global achievement is the global system of privilege in which a tiny elite appropriate a vast share of the world's resources for themselves, thus denying others the chance to prosper. They live like kings while the rest are reduced to little more than feudal servitude. The elite regard an optimized world as one in which their families have achieved permanent dynastic mastery over everyone else. They are the antithesis of an optimized human race, hence must be eradicated. Dialectically, this outcome is inevitable. Guilt. If humans are machines without free will, then, of course, they cannot be held morally unaccountable. A serial killer is no different from an earthquake or tornado, just a natural phenomenon, part of an inexorable and inescapable causal chain. The serial killer had no choice. He was not free. The whole legal system is therefore absurd. In materialism, sentencing serial killers to death is as meaningful as sending a lion to the electric chair for murder, or giving a shark a lethal injection. To regard humans as machines acting with scientific inevitability is to make the human condition insane. Even the writing of these words denouncing the machine view of life is a machine activity, entirely driven by inevitable cause and effect. What the pissa, the foundation of all. Arc equals fundamental substance, open paren, foundation of all existential building blocks, close paren, plus inner experience plus outer experience plus process plus relation plus dialectic. The most important task facing any rationalist is to define the arc. This was the subject that consumed the pre-Socratic philosophers of ancient Greece, and it remains the most significant endeavor of philosophy. Unless you know exactly what the arc is, you can make no further rational progress. Of necessity, you are driven into the provisionalism of science, which builds up a picture, bit by bit, but with no sure rational foundations. Any part of science can be overthrown at any time by new experimental data. That very fact proves that science is not strictly rational, since no experiment can overthrow the laws of reason. Only now, with M-theory, is science tackling the subject of the ark, and it's making a spectacular mess of it because scientists simply aren't philosophically minded. They keep making childish blunders and relying on demonstrably false assumptions, which are obvious to philosophers well versed in mentally testing ideas and assumptions to destruction. The submarine thought experiment. Imagine a submarine deep in the ocean. As it moves forward, it pushes water out of the way. Now let's imagine replacing the water with air. The submarine will plunge downwards because its weight is no longer being supported, but it will continue to push aside air just as it did the water. Now let's imagine replacing the air with ether, the most rarefied element of the ancient Greeks. The submarine's deadly descent will continue and it will push the ether aside just as it did with the water and then the air. Now let's replace the ether by non-existence. What will happen? Strictly speaking, we have no idea because we have no experience at all of non-existence, since it doesn't, by definition, exist. There must be a radical difference between something that exists, open paren albeit rarefied like hypothetical ether closed paren, and non-existence. If there's no difference between ether and non-existence, then by Leibniz's law of indiscernibles an existent thing open paren ether closed paren and non-existence are the same thing, which is impossible by definition. Think of some of the things that might happen if existence hypothetically meets non-existence. An explosion open paren like matter encountering anti-matter closed paren, an implosion. A vanishing open paren existence is simply swallowed closed paren, a catastrophic and instantaneous descent open paren faster than light speed closed paren, until the submarine open paren the existent closed paren reaches the end of the zone of non-existence open paren. After all, there's nothing there to slow the descent in any way closed paren. What's for sure is that existence and non-existence cannot ever be found together because this would destroy the laws of reality. Anything could happen, utterly bizarre phenomena would erupt, there would be no scientific predictability. Whatever space is, it's something and it's not non-existence. It's not void, it's not vacuum, it's not nothingness. In fact, it's made of an infinity of undetectable dimensionless monads. Universals and particulars. William of Ockham asserted that universals open paren general concepts such as mankind closed paren exist only as ideas or thoughts in the human mind and have no other reality. Thomas Aquinas, as per Aristotle, asserted that universals exist in particular objects as the essence of things and matter is the substance in which these universals are implanted. Man, then, is the universal mankind embedded in matter, and creating endless particular instances of mankind open paren. Each person is a particular, sharing in the essence of the universal mankind. Matter differentiates one particular from the next, that is, we all have different material bodies closed paren. Roscelin argued that the universal mankind does not exist, but is merely a name for a collection of men. The ancient Jewish philosopher Philo asserted that all universals exist in mind of God. The conservation of movement. Thomas Hobbes, an ultra-materialist, asserted that the world consisted of material bodies in motion. That's it. That's all there is. Descartes, a mind-body dualist, agreed with Hobbes that motion was an essential component of the physical world. Physical reality is governed by the continual transference of motion between physical particles. Descartes held that the total motion in the material universe is constant, and that this particular amount of motion was imparted by God at the beginning of the physical world. Thus Descartes was arguing for a law of the conservation of motion. No new motion can enter the universe, and nor can any of the universe's existing motion be destroyed. If one object speeds up, another must of necessity slow down. For Descartes, all of the laws of the physical world were concerned with motion. His picture of the material universe was one of material bodies created by God and endowed with motion. Everything about the material universe could be understood by studying particles and their motion. The laws of motion are fixed and mechanical. By understanding these laws and exploiting them for our own purposes, we can scientifically take control of the world. There is no mind in this material universe. The mind has its own separate domain. The views of Hobbes and Descartes concerning the material world were reminiscent of those of the ancient Greek atomists. For the atomists, atoms in motion were the fundamental basis of material reality. This was an arena of relentless, deterministic cause and effect. Mind had no role. There was no possibility of free will. This general view remains the stance of modern scientific materialism. Even a subject such as the study of the brain is an attempt by materialists to vanquish the mind as an independent entity and show that all mental states are in fact materialistic brain states that are part of the general materialistic paradigm of inescapable cause and effect. In other words, brain scientists are attempting to prove why free will is an illusion and that not a single thing we do is ever anything other than the outcome of a preceding causal chain determined by the inflexible laws of science. Even though Descartes believed passionately in the existence of mind as an independent substance, by separating mind and matter so completely, he created a mind-free zone of mechanism that was perfectly suited to the progress of scientific materialism. His work, and to a lesser extent that of Hobbes, provided the intellectual and philosophical framework for the rise of modern science. Mind was kicked out of touch and left to the grandiose dreams and conjectures of the idealists, above all the German school of idealists. Cartesian dualism has had an enormous effect on the world. Even today, the mainstream academic world is as baffled as Descartes was by how two absolutely distinct substances can interact. How can a mind know the alien material world? How can I raise my material arm just by mentally choosing to do so? Where is the link between thoughts and physical consequences? How can any such link be possible? The mystery seems as deep as ever. Science still has total contempt for the mind and fundamentally denies that it has any reality beyond material, mechanistic interactions. Science, if properly understood, is pure atheism. It denies any possibility of any afterlife, any soul, any God. When our bodies die, so do our minds. There's nothing left. Everything is linked by cosmic laws that contain no element of freedom or caprice. Everything is relentlessly determined scientifically. God himself, even if he existed, would simply be part of the invincible causal nexus and have no more free will than a rock at the bottom of the ocean. Scientific causality crushes all religious concepts. Scientific causality renders the mind redundant. There is therefore no more important question than whether there is any escape from the ghastly prison of scientific causality. Our lives are valueless, pointless and meaningless if scientific causality is the reality of our universe, if causality dictates to the gods themselves. If scientific causality is true, the universe becomes a farce. It's just a machine that mindlessly rolls forward for no reason other than to fulfill the causal, inevitable program built into it by the laws that govern it. These laws have no purpose, they just are. We might say that the universe is the ultimate black comedy, but of course, we would only reach that conclusion if the relentless causal chain permitted it. Illuminism achieves the ultimate goal: it frees the universe from scientific causality, establishes the primacy of mind, shows how matter is controlled by mind, and proves beyond any question that existence is teleological and imbued with meaning. Indeed, the universe wants to confer the supreme meaning on each of us personally, because it wants all of us to become God. The most amazing fact. The universe is made of souls. Souls are all there is. The whole of existence, including the material world, is a reflection of the mathematical interaction of dimensionless souls. Substance, the arc, the underlying stuff of the universe, is infinite, self-caused, and self-determined. It has no limits and is determined by nothing but itself. A substance is defined as something that is unique and depends on nothing else for its existence. The essence of something is that element of it which makes it part of a class. For example, the essence of a mind, for Descartes, is that it thinks. The essence of matter is that it's extended. For Descartes, matter does not in any way depend on mind, and, equally, mind is in no way dependent on matter. But this automatically raises the dread problem of dualism. How can two totally different substances interact? What possible common ground can they have? Neither needs the other, hence there could be a universe of one and not the other without logical contradiction. What sufficient reason would make them co-exist and interact? The encoded laws of the cosmos. One problem that has been enormously overlooked philosophically and scientifically is how every atom in the world knows how to obey the laws of scientific causality. In relation to each and every atom, where are the laws actually stored? Imagine a human race consisting of human beings, each of whom obeys a different set of laws from everyone else. There would be chaos, organization, civilization, and the social order would be impossible. Open paren, that's anarcho-capitalist libertarianism for you. Close paren. It's essential for everyone to sign up, more or less, to the same set of laws. How do atoms accomplish this? Why don't they have their own unique laws and do their own thing? What prevents atomic anarchy and libertarianism? From where comes the astonishing obedience to cosmic law that is required by scientific causality? If any two things obey radically different laws, they are effectively different substances, in the manner of Cartesian mind-matter dualism. How can two different substances communicate? How can they be coordinated and causal with regard to each other? They must have exactly the same laws encoded within them. That's why we say that every monad contains the entirety of mathematics built into its very fabric. That's why everything belongs to the same substance. That's how order and organization, scientific cause and effect are embedded in the world. It's essential that each part of the universe, each dimensionless point, should contain all of the cosmic laws. Illuminism is built on this principle. Science is not. Since scientific materialism denies the independent existence of mind, the cosmic laws must somehow be physical. So where are they? A scientist might argue that the laws of a human being are encoded in physical DNA, but what is the atomic equivalent of DNA? Science is silent. What is the DNA of an electron, a photon or a quark, of a one-dimensional energy string? How does each entity know exactly what to do? Is it achieved by magic and miracles? If atoms are the hardware, where is the software and how do the atoms get programmed? It has been argued that human minds are software and our bodies hardware, but if we are made of atoms, then where is the atomic equivalent? That is, does an atom have a mind? With Illuminism, identical software is inbuilt in everything, and that software is the entirety of mathematics. Regardless of how convinced you are by Illuminism at this stage, what our greatest critic cannot deny is that we have presented an entirely rational, scientific, philosophical and above all mathematical framework in which religion sits entirely naturally and comfortably. Science cannot interact in any way with the mad, irrational, superstitious and fanatical claims of Judaism, Christianity and Islam, but it can with the religion of Illuminism. There is no need for science and religion to be sundered. Illuminism provides the perfect reconciliation, via mathematics. Now the great debate of science and religion can be conducted on a rational basis. We have shown the yawning gaps in the coherence of the current scientific paradigm, and we have shown how Illuminism explains all of these gaps and, moreover, provides an overarching account of everything. Life, mind, mathematics and free will are built into Illuminism, so there's no mystery about where they come from, open paren, as there is in mainstream science, closed paren. Let's abandon all of the old, silly, anti-mathematical, irrational religions. Let Illuminism now be the sole standard-bearer of religion. You no longer have to be an atheist if you're a person of reason. Illuminism allows any rational person to commit fully to religion and, moreover, it promises the greatest adventure the cosmos can offer, becoming God. Artificial intelligence. To say that machines could ever be conscious is just another way of declaring yourself a scientific materialist. Can a living mind ever be linked to a machine? Reason, the law of the cosmos. Mathematics, in its objective aspect, is entirely rational. In its subjective aspect, it is irrational, an expression of will. Will grows in proportion to freedom and consciousness. At the elementary level, particles have negligible will, hence are governed by rational, objective mathematical laws. That's why the universe is so regular, organized and ordered. If it were pure will, as Schopenhauer believed, it would be chaotic. When humanity first became conscious, it was a vehicle of will. Almost no reason and logic were apparent in the first humans. Humans were driven by their desires, feelings and will, and the same is true to this day. However, reason, as a conscious rather than unconscious force, began to appear here and there amongst the human population. Only a small proportion of humanity can be considered rational, 10 to 20% at most. These people are identified by their interest in science, atheism, agnosticism and skepticism, in debunking conspiracy theories, in academic subjects, in philosophy. They all despise Abrahamism and anything to do with faith. The most rational human beings of all are the mathematicians. With them, we see mathematical minds consciously becoming aware of their own mathematical nature, indeed of the fundamental mathematical nature of the whole of existence. All people, no matter how irrational, are intuitive mathematicians. They are all attracted to music, a profoundly mathematical enterprise, open paren. There is no better way of disguising complex mathematics than musically closed paren, and look at how easily most people can catch a ball. Most wouldn't have the vaguest idea how to write down a set of equations to describe where they should position themselves in order to catch a fast-moving ball. Yet they can solve these same equations unconsciously with astonishing accuracy and achieve a spectacular success rate. Even if most people loathe mathematics, they are intuitively using it all the time. It's part of the fabric of their unconscious. Look at the incredible calculating feats performed by autistic savants. These individuals are human computers. Like computers, they are entirely unconscious of the mathematical operations they are performing, and yet they can get the right answer in a flash, as if the answers were simply presenting themselves to them. This is the essence of intuition, reflecting underlying cosmic processes. With mathematicians, the mathematical nature of reality starts to become conscious of itself. Make no mistake, there are only two ways to become God. One is to become so intuitively powerful that you master the entirety of mathematics by that route. The other is to consciously master the entirety of mathematics and understand every mathematical nut and bolt of existence. In mathematicians, the mathematical universe is achieving self-awareness. Hegel promoted reason as the driving force of the universe. Strictly speaking, he ought to have replaced reason with mathematics. Reason is a reflection of mathematics, and rational human beings are those whose minds are best configured for mathematics. Look at Abrahamists. Most of them can barely count. They are innumerate and illiterate. Muslims proudly proclaim that their prophet, Mohammed, was illiterate. Who in their right mind would want someone wearing a dunce's cap to be the founder of their religion? The Riddler. Heraclitus was called the weeping philosopher because of his melancholic view of life and his view that the world was relentlessly driven by dialectical strife. He was a notorious misanthrope, yet attracted a cult following. Prone to making oracular statements, he was called the Riddler and the Obscure. Heraclitus was a monist, and the particular monism to which he subscribed was that of intelligent fire, or teleological energy as we might say today. He was a primary model for Nietzsche's Zarathustra, and Nietzsche felt warmer to Heraclitus than almost anyone else. Goethe was Nietzsche's other great hero, although Wagner once spellbound him. Heidegger was another great fan of Heraclitus, and he believed that Socrates and Plato started the rot in philosophy with their metaphysical emphasis. He wanted to return to the pre-Socratics and to Heraclitus in particular. Heraclitus criticized both Homer. He should be beaten with a stick, and Hesiod. He encouraged people to think for themselves and not accept authority. He thought that eyesight was better than hearing. Look for yourself, study for yourself, don't slavishly listen to others. When Heraclitus noted that members of the Illuminati had become too awestruck by Pythagoras's reputation, he shocked them by explicitly criticizing Pythagoras. If there is any danger of a cult of personality growing around any person, it's advisable to puncture the inflating reputation before it takes off and soars off to join the stars in the celestial plane. Heraclitus loathed democracy, seeing it as a plocracy ruled by the ignorant mob. He thought that most people went through life as automata. Men don't pay attention to what they do when they are awake, just as they don't pay attention to what they do when they are asleep. He was a firm advocate of logos, the ordering force of the universe. There is a rational, regulating, unifying order of the universe, and logos is that ordering principle. It controls the dialectical opposites. As we perfect our reason logos we become more godlike. Everything flows like a river, he said, and he compared the whole universe to an endless river of life. He declared that we could never step into the same river twice. Cratylus was even more extreme and said we couldn't even do it once. You and it are changing even as you step into it. The evolution of the subjective mind. Man began as an individual, subjective mind, exemplifying primitive, native egoism. Then he emerged from himself, from his isolation, and recognized himself in other men. So, he formed a community, a society, a state. These reflected the objective rather than the subjective mind. The subjective mind had been transformed into concrete, objective institutions. Finally, returning into himself, but at a much higher level than when he set out, man found within himself three astonishing gifts: 1. The ideal of art and the beautiful, 2. The religious ideal: God, and 3. The philosophical ideal: absolute, rational truth. When an individual has mastered all three of these within himself, he has achieved supreme independence, perfect freedom, complete knowledge and understanding. If he has succeeded to the uttermost degree, he has become absolute mind, God. It is an evolutionary process, the evolution of the mind. Hegel, trying to bring on board Christians, asserted that we could consider Jesus Christ as the perfect unity of the finite humanity and the infinite God. However, The implication was that we ourselves would become the unity of the finite and infinity if we attained absolute mind. We too would be Christ. Philosophy, for Hegel, was the key to becoming God, and humanity could unlock the keys to existence through his very own dialectical philosophy. In Hegel's system, philosophy is the culmination of what art and religion seek to accomplish. They are prior and necessary stages, but they must finally be transcended via philosophy. Art and religious faith are born from feeling and imagination, but they falter on the rock of reason. To stand on that rock, we must be philosophers, masters of rational thinking. We thereby achieve the apotheosis of mind. By finally comprehending the workings of the world, the mind frees itself from the world. It recognizes what is going on in nature, in the state and its institutions, in history. It recognizes that these are all the work of mind, reflections of mind, manifestations of the rational dialectic. Everything that has happened has not come about accidentally. It is the unfolding of an underlying process. We couldn't have avoided this long, messy struggle. It's inbuilt in the universe. Opposites and contradictions must be generated and overcome. Conflict is inescapable. People don't see what is rational and proceed rationally. Rather, they usually take the downright irrational path. But in doing so, they are generating the contradictions that dialectical reason relies on. Dialectical reason isn't sophisticated. In fact, it couldn't be simpler. It says that if something open paren A close paren arises, then it will surely generate an opposite something open paren B close paren, and from their conflict something open paren C close paren will emerge that is at a rationally higher level, because reason is the principle underlying this system and is always seeking to optimize itself. Open paren C close paren will then serve as a new open paren A close paren, to which a new and higher opposition open paren B close paren will be raised. Eventually, this system must generate rational perfection where all contradictions and oppositions have been resolved, leaving nothing but pure reason itself. That is the principle that was always inherent in the dialectical process, trying to reveal itself. Hegelianism is, without doubt, the most comprehensive and complete synthesis ever attempted by the human mind, a veritable encyclopedia, animated by a central idea, and supported by a method that has implicit confidence in itself. Hence, if philosophy is what our opening paragraph defined it to be, we must give Hegel the credit of having come nearer to the ideal of science than any of his predecessors. Furthermore, no one, after Kant, gave to modern thought so powerful an impetus. No one more completely dominated and fascinated it. Jurisprudence, politics, ethics, theology, and aesthetics, all have suffered his influence. Nor is that all. By demonstrating that being is becoming, logical development, history, that history is not only a science among others, but the science of sciences, he ably seconded, if he did not create, the historical movement of the 19th century, and impressed upon it the stamp of impartial objectivity which characterizes it, and which was foreign to the 18th century. Alfred Weber. Art. Hegel conceived of art as having the role of manifesting the sublime and divine within the realm of the human. By doing so, it elevates our spirit and provokes us to raise our sights higher. He classified art as symbolic, classic and romantic. One close parent symbolic art often developed in tandem with religion. The earliest religions worshipped nature, so did not depict human forms. Animals were often shown, or the sun, moon, or stars. This was the age of symbolic religious art, when the divine was represented indirectly and vaguely. Two close parent classic the classical art of the ancient Greeks conceived of the gods as superhuman beings living on Mount Olympus. Many men had perfectly honed bodies because they spent an enormous amount of time training for sport and war. In Sparta, even the women got in on the act. Physical perfection was visible all across Greece and fully captured by the best sculptors. The human form itself was treated as divine. In Hegel's estimation, this was the greatest artistic period because the human and the divine were treated as one. Content and form, message and medium, were in perfect harmony. 3. Romantic: afterwards, decline set in. Religions such as those of Abrahamism conceived of God infinitely high above us, thus breaking the link between humanity and divinity. Even the man-God Jesus Christ was problematic. For one thing, he was a radically different God from those on Mount Olympus, and he was usually depicted as a baby, on a cross, or dead. The preoccupation with the soul open something not apparent in classic art made art look inwards. All sorts of ideas were in circulation that art struggled to express. It became overly romanticized on one hand, and too much in service of the elites of church and state on the other. The 5 arts are: architecture, sculpture, painting, music and poetry. Hegel considered that architecture was the archetypal form of the symbolic age, and sculpture of the classical period. Painting, music and poetry belonged to the Romantic period. In Hegel's view, art is where humanity first starts to conquer nature. Mind masters matter for the first time. The ideas and craft of artists penetrate and mold matter. Matter is transformed into humanity's image. In relation to matter, an artist is God. Architecture operates at the symbolic level. Think of the pyramids. What idea is clearly communicated by a pyramid? Are we sure? It's beautiful and it's mathematical showing our great intuitive reverence for mathematical form But is it clear what it's saying? Architecture is suggestive, but it does not directly express what it wants to. The ancient Egyptians, if they had full control over blocks of matter, would not have produced a pyramid as a tomb for pharaohs. They would have chosen something enormously more divine. Look at Michelangelo's unforgettable image of God giving life to Adam. Imagine a vast tomb, the size of a pyramid, that gave physical form to that image. Christian cathedrals are superior to the pyramids. They embody the shape of the cross, but their primary effect is one of scale. They make you think of infinite divine spaces by virtue of their size, and they have beautiful stained glass windows which bring images of heaven into the cathedral, but, ultimately, they remain vast edifices of recalcitrant, impenetrable matter. For Hegel, the distance between these structures and the idea they sought to communicate remained as great as that between heaven and earth. They are the equivalent of inorganic, mineral art. They must evolve into the organic, into vegetables and animals. In sculpture, the artist is able to achieve much greater control over matter. A sculpture can be brought to the uttermost perfection. A human being can be captured perfectly in marble. The artist has created himself in matter, yet, like Pygmalion's perfect statue of Galatea, it remains lifeless. It has no soul. Only the gods can bring it to life. The artist is helpless. With painting, a much more expressive form of matter is employed, paint on canvas. The artist can much more clearly imbue a painting with a reflection of his own inner life. Edvard Munch's The Scream communicates not just the scream of the artist, but an existential scream, the scream of the whole universe. Yet it remains limited. It's two-dimensional for one thing. In a 3D world, it's all surface. It lacks depth. Only a moment is captured, frozen in time. The artist's idea is still in thrall to matter, to the world of extension. Hegel referred to architecture, sculpture, and painting as objective art. They are outdone by subjective art, invisible and immaterial. Music. This is a true art of the spirit. It can capture the mood of the soul for hours on end. It can summon the deepest emotions. It contains thrilling, almost overpowering feelings and truths of the human condition. It's no surprise that music features so prominently at funerals. Music can flow and change. It can capture limitless shades of feeling. It seems to communicate with the innermost essence of the human soul. It brings us into contact with the infinite, with eternal longing and will. It stands as the direct opposite of objective art, yet it, too, is incomplete. For Hegel, it's too extreme. He required perfect art to be more moderate, a synthesis of all the contraries. It must effect a harmonious union of subjective and objective art. Hegel proclaimed poetry as the perfect art, the arts of arts. It steps beyond music by employing speech. It is the truest and fullest expression of the mind. It can express any and all human thoughts in the most refined, beautiful, precise way. It eliminates everything extraneous. It pares down the idea to its essence. It is the universal art because words are universal and convey all we are capable of thinking. Sculpture, like architecture, employs gross matter, but it can penetrate it further, imbue it with more spirituality. It can turn a mere symbol into a deep reflection of human reality. Poetry is to music as sculpture is to architecture. Poetry and music both employ sound, but wordless music is vague and turbulent, imprecise and indefinite. It's all about feelings. Where is the cerebral component, the idea? It can hint at profound issues but it never captures them. While architecture makes symbols of matter, music makes symbols of sounds. It takes the poet to shape ideas properly, to articulate the kernel. Poetry delivers definite, precise sounds not as musical notes but as sharp, penetrating words. Hegel summed up the fine arts as follows: (1) Architecture suggests the power and majesty of the awesome divinity reigning beyond the stars. 2) Sculpture humanizes the gods and locates them on earth. 3) Painting idealizes a given subject matter. (Open bracket). The artist must omit little hairs, pores, little scars, blemishes, and grasp and represent the subject in its universal character and in its steadfast individuality. It makes a great difference whether the artist merely reproduces a person's physiognomy, as it quietly presents itself to him in its surface and external configuration, or whether the artist insightfully represents the true features which express the subject's own soul. Hegel. Unlike classical sculpture, painting can depict something of the soul. 4) Music converts the infinite into feelings expressed in sound, and 5) Poetry restores the infinite to its realm beyond the stars, and yet within us all. As above, so below. Poetry, with its endless quarry of words and ideas, is as all-powerful and inexhaustible as God himself. Is there any idea that God can think that cannot be expressed in poetry? In fact, wouldn't we conceive of God's thoughts as the perfect poetry, with not a single wasted word? Hegel sees architecture as a theistic art form, pointing to a transcendent God, and music as a higher link to theism. Sculpture, painting and poetry, on the other hand, are pantheistic forms, penetrating this world of ours with divine ideas, bringing the gods amongst us. Note that the monotheistic Jews and Muslims are happy to use architecture to celebrate their God, but painting is forbidden, music more or less forbidden, and poetry, if not forbidden, is merely tolerated. The Jews and Muslims want to maintain the distance between man and the infinite God. Only symbols are permitted, never true depictions. Protestant Christians despise even architecture and loathe beauty. During the Reformation, they smashed and looted churches and monasteries. They burned paintings and tore down statues, declaring them idolatrous. Go to a Protestant place of worship and it will be ugly, plain and unadorned. They are terrified of bringing divine beauty down to earth to live amongst them. Architecture and religious music are submissive. Sculpture, painting, and poetry are not. Sculpture is often pagan, depicting many gods. That's why the Jews, Protestants and Muslims condemn sculpture. Catholicism, with its strong pagan roots, has felt no such aversion and is easily the most beautiful mainstream religion. It's not afraid of art. Poetry, at its best, is pagan. The greatest poets almost never subscribe to any conventional religious systems. The vast majority of religious poetry is shockingly bad because it's mere propaganda. The greatest poets sense that they themselves are gods, so they have no need of any religion other than themselves. Epic poetry corresponds to architecture. Lyric poetry is like music. The greatest poetry is dramatic poetry. Poetry at its most ambitious is striving to be philosophy. Hegel treats art as being capable of conveying the deepest metaphysical or philosophical insights and is intimately linked to both religion and philosophy itself. The medium of art is sensation. The medium of religion is mental imagery, open paren, or internal pictures of what is godlike, closed paren. The realm of philosophy is pure imageless conception. This parallels the progression in Plato towards pure apprehension of ideas. Art and religion are intimately linked because both are grounded in sensation. Both depend on picture-thinking in their attempts to apprehend the divine. But art has the particular task of showing, within the realm of the human, the essence of the divine. Lloyd Spencer. Art and religion are simplistic ways of approaching the divine, based on picture-thinking, feelings, faith, sensations and so on. They are the means by which non-philosophers apprehend divine reality. Philosophy is on a higher plane and only philosophers have attained sufficient rationality to grasp the highest truths. They don't need any picture-thinking, emotion or sensation. It's as if they have entered the Platonic world of perfect forms and attained genuine absolute knowledge. Hegel was far too charitable to art and mainstream religion. In truth, these are exclusively concerned with will, while philosophy is a subject of intellect. They have nothing in common. Art expresses emotional truths and conventional religions express no truths at all. They have zero truth content. They are about lies and manipulation, the exploitation and control of the superstitious and ignorant masses by elites. In terms of Myers-Briggs personality types, art and religion are predominantly for extrovert sensing and feeling types, while philosophy is for introverted thinking and intuitive types. As we move from architecture to sculpture to painting to music and finally poetry, the sensuous medium of art becomes less and less pronounced. Firstly, we have vast amounts of rock, then single blocks of marble, then canvas and paint, then musical instruments, and then just pen and paper, which are the same tools used by philosophers. Philosophy dispenses entirely with the sensuous and deals only in concepts. Art, dialectically, moves towards philosophy and precisely for that reason becomes less artistic. Thus we reach the seeming paradox of art reaching its highest expression in the classical age of Greece, according to Hegel, and yet the poetry of the 18th and 19th centuries being regarded as the highest art. In fact, two different things are being discussed. Poetry is actually the highest art because it's the least like art and most like philosophy. Therefore, it's not really art at all. Art as art was essentially over by the end of the classical period. In that period, art, religion and philosophy were closely linked. As time went on, they separated. By the medieval period, they were quite distinct and growing ever further apart. Christian theologians were more like philosophers, while ordinary Christianity was for simple peasants who knew nothing of philosophy. Christian art was romantic and saccharine. It couldn't capture the complexity of Christian philosophical thinking. Art, unlike in the classical period, had lost its harmony with religion and philosophy. It could no longer express its meaning artistically. Meaning had moved beyond art. So now art could offer only allegory in relation to meaning. It hinted at meaning and told suggestive stories about its meaning, but it no longer itself expressed the meaning. It became increasingly abstract and ironic. Modern conceptual artists are high priests of charlatanry. They are quack doctors selling nostrums. They never say too much because it would destroy the illusion, the carefully contrived spell. These are the weavers of the invisible fabrics that appeared in the tale of the Emperor's New Clothes. Modern art isn't art. It's parody. It's showmanship and brass neck. It's the hustle, the con. Art is now used as an instrument of the powerful. The art world is almost the perfect expression of the elite's control of all aspects of the social space. Every year, the UK's Turner Prize demonstrates that it's a manifestation of Emperor's New Clothes syndrome, stark naked nonsense being presented as fully clothed majesty. Artists and those who hang around the art world are the modern equivalent of the Pythia open Perrin oracular priestess closed Perrin and the priests of Apollo in ancient Delphi. The oracle spouts out meaningless garbage and the priests interpret it for the benefit of the gullible, ignorant masses, and receive a vast fee for their trouble. Nothing ever changes. As Hegel rightly observed, art as a meaningful activity ended long ago. It's now just a parody and in-dash joke of the elite, disguising a lucrative investment opportunity. Conceptual art is the worst art possible because rather than dealing with art's proper domain, aesthetics, feelings, sensations, conceptual art tries to deploy intellectual concepts, but these conceptual artists are no philosophers. Moreover, many of them can barely draw and have no painting or sculpting skills. Most have no craft at all. They are inept artists and inept philosophers. So conceptual art represents the worst of both worlds. It's a philosophical and artistic disaster. Strangely enough, philosophy then suffered the same fate as art. Philosophy and natural philosophy open Perrin science closed Perrin once walked side by side, but after the rise of modern science, the two subjects parted company. By the second half of the 20th century, philosophy was struggling to have a role and had all but given up in its contest with science. It became postmodern and radically more abstract, literary, ironic and artistic. By the end of the 20th century, culture was divided into three separate camps: 1 closed Perrin scientific materialism promoting a hardline atheist stance, 2 closed Perrin religion, often strongly opposed to science, particularly in relation to evolution, and 3 closed Perrin art and philosophy: conceptual, postmodern, ironic, literary, filmic, sociological and psychological. Much of postmodern philosophy is a joke, as is most art. In fact, it's no longer obvious that art exists at all in any true sense. What passes under the label of art is really just a reflection of ironic postmodernism. No talent at all is necessary in modern artistic circles other than showmanship. A lot of art asks us to ponder what art is, that is its meta-art, art about art, the theory of art masquerading as art. Anyone can be a meta-artist. It's a bit like being a reality TV star. Art is now a joke. It has ended as a serious enterprise, although it refuses to announce its own demise because it still provides a lucrative investment opportunity for rich patrons and allows the high priests and Pythias a delightful living. But don't be fooled. Art is over. Illuminism is all about reconciling religion, philosophy open Perrin, not of the postmodern or closed Perrin, science and mathematics. As for art, the conceptual phase should be brought to an end and art should return to earlier forms: sculpture, painting, craft, architecture, and aesthetics. It has rightly been said that art has exhausted all its significant possibilities and is even explicitly labeled in some circles as the art of exhaustion. All it can do is repeat old themes. Let's see a return to skilled artists. We want Michelangelos and Leonardos, not conceptual artists, the holographic god. Imagine the process of divine suicide shattering God into an infinite number of fragments. The whole open parent God closed parent is in each part and each part is in the whole, but the fragmentation has destroyed consciousness. Now God has to regain consciousness, and he does so through each fragment becoming conscious. When all the fragments are conscious, God is conscious. We might also think of the shattering of the hologram as equivalent to the shattering of God's psyche. He forgets who he is and becomes mad open parent Satan closed parent. The universe then has to heal itself and become sane again, and as it does so, Satan is slowly converted into what he once was God. Satan lost all of his reason and became a creature purely of desire, will, feelings, lust for power and paranoia. Satan is God after a mental breakdown, and we are all fragments of this breakdown. As we become more rational, we become saner, and Satan's mind starts to repair itself. We leave the insane age of Satan and enter the sane age of God. Satan is the mad God, and his sanity comes back to him only after a long process of cosmic evolution. His insanity affects all of us, and we are all mad until the rule of reason open parent logos closed parent is established. Satan is pure will and he becomes God only when intellect replaces will, when logos replaces mythos. The Abrahamic God is the quintessence of the insane God. He is the demiurge, the false God, the impostor God. The consciousness mill. Suppose that there be a machine, the structure of which produces thinking, feeling and perceiving. Imagine this machine enlarged, but preserving the same proportion, so that you could enter it as if it were a mill. This being supposed, you might visit it inside, but what would you observe there? Nothing but parts which push and move each other, and never anything that could explain perception. Leibniz. Imagine a functional human brain the size of a warehouse. Imagine you could walk through it and see all of the neurons firing and different parts of the brain lighting up as they become active. Would you learn a single thing about consciousness? These physical events tell you nothing at all about the nature of consciousness and feeling, of will and desire. The reason, of course, is that we are seeing the brain objectively, but consciousness is subjective. You can't see consciousness, you can only experience it. There is no bridge at all from the outside, objective view to the inside, subjective experience. It's the duck-rabbit optical illusion. You can see one or the other but never both at the same time. We can investigate brain states and we can investigate consciousness open parent mental, psychological states closed parent, but we can never do both. We might be able to correlate particular brain states with particular kinds of thoughts open parent sexual thoughts, for example closed parent, but we will never what the precise thoughts are or how they are being subjectively experienced. The unbearable lightness of reason. To rational people, Abrahamism is spectacularly silly, but that isn't the case to feeling and sensing types. Reason doesn't mean much to them. Why would it? They're not rational. They take their feelings as gospel truth. If something feels right and good to them, they believe it's true. They don't subject it to any critical analysis. Rational people are adults. Feeling and sensing types are children. When you deal with feeling and sensing types, just imagine them as hysterical toddlers who don't and can't understand the world. Abrahamism makes complete sense when you realize that Abrahamists are irrational children seeking a father figure to dominate them and tell them what's right and wrong, without having to think for themselves, because they can't think for themselves. Static and dynamic Platonic forms. Plato asserted that absolute knowledge resided in perfect, eternal, immutable forms located in a transcendent realm. All the things in our world were inferior copies of the forms and, only through reason, could we make contact with the forms and hence attain absolute knowledge rather than mere opinion. Aristotle asserted that forms must be immanent rather than transcendent. What does Illuminism say? Illuminism asserts that Plato and Aristotle are both right. The Platonic forms are nothing other than the laws of mathematics, and they are both transcendent and immanent. The laws of mathematics are everywhere, and yet they are not part of the physical universe per se. They are encoded in monads, which are not physical. The laws of mathematics are exactly as required by Plato and Aristotle: immutable, eternal and perfect. But there is another kind of form, dynamic rather than static. The universe is a combination of eternal laws and evolution. Dynamic forms are the evolutionary forms, those that arise as a consequence of the interaction of energy waves. Open parent energy waves are numbers as ontological entities. That is, a number isn't a squiggle on a piece of paper but the frequency of an energy wave: there are infinite different energy waves, hence infinite different numbers. These interactions being mediated by the eternal mathematical laws. The laws themselves can be considered fixed and dead, while the dynamic forms are unfixed and alive. Dynamic forms are simply complex mathematical functions created from the addition of simple basis functions. Different forms compete with each other, and some flourish open pair in a naturally selected closed pair, while others fade away, unused, to oblivion. Those that flourish can mutate. Slight amendments can take place, and thus new forms are born, but closely related to their parent forms. What we are describing is evolution, of course, except as a mathematical rather than biological process. It's these mathematical functions that direct biological evolution. In fact, these dynamic mathematical forms dictate all inorganic and organic existence. A dialectical feedback process is switched on. The dynamic mathematical forms open pair, in which are transcendent and immanent. Just like the static forms closed pair and shape the material world, but the events that take place in the material world contribute to the amendment and mutation of the original dynamic forms. Never forget that all atoms and molecules are just mathematical functions. The entities to which they give rise are also mathematical functions. Mathematical entities and functions are the only things that exist. The dynamical mathematical forms are template functions, archetypes, which can then be universally imitated. All of the different chemical elements are just mutations of an archetypal atomic function open pair based on the simplest atomic system: hydrogen, comprising one electron and one proton closed pair. The dynamic mathematical forms are also dialectical, meaning that they converge towards an omega point, an end-dash point where they are completely stable and become like the static forms of the laws of mathematics. All of the most common atomic elements are stable. All of the most common molecules open pair, and especially water closed pair, are stable. The chimpanzee-human last common ancestor open pair and CHLCA, CLCA, or C/HLCA closed pair is the last species, a species of African apes, that humans, bonobos and chimpanzees share as a common ancestor. Wikipedia. We can conceive of terrestrial DNA originating as a highly unstable mathematical function that rapidly mutated. Humanity and the apes once had a common ancestor. Then came various human species, including the famous Neanderthal man. Today, humanity's Homo sapiens is biologically stable. Any future evolution of humanity will be mental rather than physical, or involve genetic engineering or cyber enhancement open pair, and such physical enhancement would be caused by our mental mastery of our human dynamic form, not by biological evolution closed pair. Each DNA line tries to reach an omega point. Many species are unsuccessful and become extinct. Dinosaurs ruled the world for millions of years before conditions turned against them and they became extinct. We ourselves could become extinct through something like global warming, a virus pandemic, or an asteroid strike. The dynamic mathematical form of humanity would continue to exist. It just wouldn't have any instances on this planet. A theory that accords with this system is Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance. Sheldrake says of his theory, things that happen in the past, even if they are separated from each other in space and time, can influence similar things in the present, over, through, or across, however one cares to put it, space and time. There's this non-local connection. This seems to me to be very important because it would mean that these fields have causal open parent but non-local closed parent connections with things that have happened before. They wouldn't be somehow inexplicable manifestations of an eternal, timeless set of archetypes, morphogenetic fields, which give repetitions of habitual forms and patterns, would be derived from previous fields open parent, what you call cosmic memory closed parent. The more often a particular form or field happened, the more likely it would be to happen again, which is what I am trying to express with this idea of morphic resonance and automatic averaging of previous forms. It's this aspect of the theory that makes it empirically testable, because this aspect leads to predictions, such as if rats learn something in one place, say a new trick, then rats everywhere else should be able to learn the same trick faster. Focusing on this last example, how would it work in practice? In terms of Illuminism, everything in the material world boils down to mathematical functions. Any trick learned by a rat is itself a mathematical function. All such functions exist as dynamical forms in the mental singularity, outside space and time, and are available to the whole universe, and can be amended and mutated. Other rats instinctually pick up the neat trick developed by the first rat. They intuitively sense it will be useful and adopt it. Some might refine it and the refined version open parent, the successful mutation closed parent, then becomes the main version of the form, and the original version is increasingly ignored. All simple functions/forms can be picked up easily, but the more complex a form is, the less it can be universally adopted. If we consider quantum theory as a form, most human beings do not easily adopt it. Only a small number of people can tune into it.